Well, hello. Man, it has been a long day. They finally got Canvas working after about 4:30. So I'm going to record hopefully the end of this book. Let's do it. Maybe in two more sessions, I will get to the end. So we are on to chapter 39. Um, Remember, Sarah went to a church gathering of Mr. Morton Jr.'s, and his dad was there, and they were trying to rally people up to think that maybe she was a witch and that it's somehow her fault that people are sick and dying and that there's a drought. And so she got herself out of there before things got bad, and a red coat officer, I forget what his name was now because I'm not. Let's see. My father is one staunch King's man. So Mr. Morton, Constable Hawkins. So Constable Hawkins actually tried to save her. Okay. And remember, there's an older woman and there was a younger girl in that place they were in, like a barn. And so I'm wondering about them, but the constable showed up. Young Mr. Isaac Morton and her are leaving. She's staying at the inn. Mrs. Thorpe and her husband are on her side. And she says, I'm not leaving the mountain. And hopefully those people won't follow her. They would burn people's houses down and try to run them out of town. So let's see what's going to happen. Chapter 39. The meeting began just past noon in the tavern, in a room upstairs where people played billiards. It was a big room with a billiard table in the center and chairs around two of the sides. There were many windows. Some of them looked out upon the street and others upon a grove of elm trees and cornfields that stretched beyond. The sun was beating down through a pearly haze on the dusty street when Isaac left the store and we met in front of the tavern. I thought it was a bad idea for us to meet together, boldly that way, but Isaac said not to mind. They knew we were coming because he had told his father. They were at the windows looking down when we climbed the steps. Uh-oh, she's going into the lion's den. Isaac took a Bible from his pocket. I'm going to read from Matthew, he said. They have forgotten Matthew. And about thee, my advice is, be patient, speak softly, and tell the truth as thee knows it. Also, thee might do well to leave the musket in the hallway as thee goes in. Man, I wouldn't leave my gun behind. There were 6 of them sitting in a stiff row against the far wall, with all the windows open and the hot wind billowing the curtains back and forth. Off in the corner, I saw Constable Hawkins and 2 men. One was the Indian who had come to Long Pond, the one I had run off. The other man was Sam Goshen. Ooh, Sam Goshen. We don't like him. But she did save Sam Goshen, so we'll see how that goes. Mr. Morton rose and said a short prayer. When he got through, he glanced at me, then at the musket I still held in my hand. Good, she still has it. I was standing beside his son in the doorway. He said something to the other 5 men, and they all stared at the musket. Then he motioned us into the room. Sir Bishop, I need to get gruffy, he said at once. It is unusual for us to listen to words of the accused, but thee is of a tender age. We wish to be fair and hear thee out. Thank you, I said, trying hard to swallow my anger. Thee is charged, he began, with witchery of an evil nature. Said witchery has brought upon the God-fearing village of Ridgeford drought that had laid waste our fields. It has brought into our midst a sickness, rampant sorrow, pain, and death. He paused to glance at his watch. Does thee deny these charges? Yes, I said, I do deny them wholly. Proceed. I am not a witch. I live alone and mind my own business. Thee lives in a cave somewhere near? On Long Pond. Why does thee live in a cave? He asked in his raspy voice. Because it is comfortable. Why does thee not live in Ridgeford like other God-fearing people? Because I like Long Pond better. Why does thee choose to live alone? Memories flooded in upon me. I couldn't speak. The room was silent. A hot wind came through the east windows. Far off, I could see clouds that were fleecy above and purple below. Isaac looked at me, hoping that I would answer, but I couldn't. Is that all thee wishes to say? Mr. Morton asked. I nodded. Words would not come. Oh, man, why didn't she talk about her father and her brother, both dead? He turned to the 2 men seated in the far corner. Sam Goshen, Will thee please step forward? Oh, okay, I've got it ready. Here we go. Goshen rose and with a limping gait took up a position in front of Mr. Morton. Goshen, did thee for a matter of 5 or 6 weeks spend time in the cave owned, at least lived in, by Sarah Bishop, who stands there? Sam Goshen touched his forelock and bowed. Yes, sir, I remember. I did live in the aforementioned cave and one on Long Pond. What did thee observe while there? Anything out of the usual? Everything was strange-like, sir. Be explicit, please. Well, one thing, she always had that musket to her shoulder, except when she was asleep, and then she had it tucked away under herself and her hand tight on a half-cocked trigger. Goshen took time to think. Go on, Mr. Morton said. For another thing, she had a muskrat running around. It only had 3 paws and was no good for nothing except maybe a pelt. Did the animal act peculiar? They all act peculiar, muskrats. There was one I caught last spring. Mr. Morton suggested that he reply to the question. She talked to it. Oh, what did she say? I don't remember exact, but things you say to people. She talked to it as if it were a person? Yes, and the muskrat answered back. Not words, mind you, but squeaks. It made my scalp tingle to hear them talking. What else, Mr. Goshen, did thee observe while living in the cave on Long Pond that would lead thee to believe that Sarah Bishop is a witch? The bat, mostly. A white bat. White bat? Yes, white as driven snow. White is an odd color for a bat, is it not? Never saw one afore in my whole life, and I'm 42, and I've run out onto lots in my time, black and brown sometimes, but nary a white one. Hope I never see one again. Did Sarah Bishop talk to the bat as she talked to the muskrat? You're sure? What else concerns the white bat? She let it out as soon as the sun set, took it back in at crack of day. Where does he think the bat went when she let it out? No telling. They roam far. I saw it once. It was dusk time about 2 miles from here. Do they roam as far as Ridgeford? Further, maybe. Mr. Morton asked more questions of Sam Goshen, but when he began to ramble, he told him to sit down and called upon the Indian. The Indian, whose name was Jim Mountain, testified that he had seen the bat and wanted to kill it, but that I had prevented him. He made up a long story about how he had actually seen it while he was camped near Ridgeford. Fire burning, he said, hot fire, tall. He held his hands high over his head. Bat, fly in fire, through fire like nothing. The wind had died down a little, but I could hear the stir of dry corn stalks. To the east, the purple clouds had moved closer. 2 other people were called by Mr. Morton, a woman and an old man. Both of them had seen the white bat flying at dusk. Looked scary, the woman said. It was white with a pink mouth. The old man had seen it 3 times, and the same evening that 3 people died. Oh, man. Mr. Morton asked then if there was anyone who wished to testify in my behalf. I will, Isaac said, and went over and stood in front of him. They looked at each other as if they had never met before in this life. Mr. Cavendish was not listening. He was reading from a ledger he had held in his lap, but the other men, seated against the wall, had their eyes fixed upon me. The faces of 2 of them were not unkindly, but quizzical, as though they had not made up their minds. The faces of the other 2 were grim, dead set against me. I looked away, out at the fields and the blue sky. I tried to pretend to myself that I was back on Long Pond, alone in the dugout, that geese were flying and swallows were making their nests, and deer were grazing in the meadows. I couldn't. All I could see was Mr. Morton standing in front of me on his short, fat legs, mean-faced and unbending. I felt like fleeing, but I could not find the strength. Oh, man, what do you think she's going to do? I think she needs to speak up and talk about what's going on. The bat and the muskrat, she saved the muskrat, hello, and the bat, hello, they're the only ones that she has to talk to, right? Of course, she's going to talk to them like people. I talk to my squirrels and my hummingbirds like people. And the horses like people, and the dogs and the cats too. Okay, chapter 40. Okay, here we go. The curtains were flapping again as Isaac started to speak, and there was a thunder far off in the east. Lo and behold, there's going to be rain. One of the men sitting against the wall said he couldn't hear very well. Isaac raised his voice. This meeting is outside the law, he said, as each of you, Seth Adams, Harold Stokes, Lem Baumgarten, David Smalley, our host, Mr. Charles Cavendish, and my father, Thomas L. Morton. As you all well know, you have no authority to set a fine, impose a sentence, or carry one out should it be imposed. Mr. Morton was standing no more than 2 short paces from his son, but he was not listening. He was squinting at me with a look of pure hatred. What you 6 men can do, Isaac said, is to drive an innocent girl from her home, not by means that are humane or legal, but only by means that are evil. If you do so, you are a set of fools, and God will punish you. He opened the Bible and read, "Judge not that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure ye met, it shall be measured to you again." Uh-oh. 2 of the men got up while he was talking and went to a window. They glanced out at the darkening sky and came back to report that a storm was building. The other 3 went and looked out. Then the first 2 got up again and joined the others at the window. Now no one was listening to Isaac. It made me angry. I was tempted to use the musket. Isaac's father hadn't moved. He stood with his feet thrust apart and his head thrown back, looking at me. I acted as if I didn't see him. The clouds must have moved fast because suddenly the room grew dim. There was a flash of lightning and thunder rumbled over the roof. All of the men ran outside. I could hear their excited voices in the street, but Mr. Morton still stood there as if he were in a trance. The room was quiet, the wind had ceased, and the curtains had stopped flapping. Isaac opened the Bible. He waited until Mr. Morton turned his gaze from him and their eyes met. Then he continued to read from Matthew. There was the sound of raindrops on the roof, a dry sound like pebbles falling. Isaac's father grew pale. Suddenly he raised his hands and let out a moan of thanksgiving. "Oh!" Then he said, grasping Isaac by the shirt front, you see, we have brought the witch to justice. Now sweet rain falls upon us." Oh my goodness. Another flash of lightning hit the room. Thunder rolled and the wind came up and blew the curtains straight out. Mr. Morton ran down the stairs. I heard him shouting. Thunder rolled again and trailed away. The post rider galloped down the street, tethered his horse at the hitching rack, and ducked inside the tavern. It rained for only a few minutes. Then the rain stopped and the sun came out bright and hot. There was the sound of corn stalks rustling in the wind. The men trooped silently up the stairs. Their clothes were damp from the shower. Mr. Morton took off his glasses and wiped them with a handkerchief. The post rider came in carrying the mail. He was spotted with rain and grime. Mr. Cavendish instructed a servant to bring him a drink. When it came, the rider swallowed it in one gulp and opened his pouch, which had 2 letters from Mr. Cavendish, or for Mr. Cavendish. "The cost is $1, the post rider said. 50 apiece? Mr. Cavendish searched in his pockets and brought out a continental bill. $1. That's dear, young man. The rider waved the bill hard. Hard cash, sir. Mr. Cavendish went off to get the money, and when he returned, Isaac spoke to his father. A short while ago, thee bragged that a witch had been brought to justice, and thus sweet rain falls upon us. I use thy exact words, sir. What does thee say now that the storm clouds passed over and have only spit upon the village of Ridgeford?" Mr. Morton pounded a small fist on the billiard table. "More than ever, she's a witch." Isaac started to answer. He paused and turned to the post rider. "Has thee come directly down from Boston as thy wont? Is thy wont? Hold on. Has thee come directly down from Boston as is thy wont?" he asked. "Departed Boston town 9 days ago," the rider replied. "Tell me, what was the weather thee left when they left Boston?" "Dry, very dry. Dry as a year-old codfish, not a drop of rain. In weeks, people complain of it bitterly and pray on their knees." "Did you find sickness along the way?" "Sickness everywhere, real bad in Hartford." The rider finished his drink and closed the mail pouch. He left with a wave of the hand, ran down the stairs and slammed the front door behind him. The clop clop of hoofs sounded in a room that had grown quiet. Isaac glanced at the men huddled around the table. "It is possible the bats can fly from Lake Wacabuck as far as Ridgeford Village," he said, "but they cannot fly hundreds of miles to the city of Boston." He looked at each man in turn. "Is there someone or anyone here who seriously believes otherwise?" His father mumbled something but fell silent. The others were silent too. Mr. Cavendish opened his letter and began to read. "Furthermore," Isaac said, "if the weather in Boston is dry as a year-old cod, if sickness lingers in all towns and cities and villages, then they cannot be caused by the girl who stands before you in this room." "Witches fly," his father answered, "around the world if they are so minded." Wow. Mr. Cavendish looked up from his letter. "That I doubt," he said, and went on reading. One of the men said that he likewise had doubts. Another started to say something, but coughed instead. They both looked shamefaced. Sam Goshen rose and went to a window and looked out. The Indian finished what the post rider had left in the glass. Isaac said, Sarah, let the men ponder on God's admonitions. It is time they did. He took my arm and led the way down the stairs and into the ladies' parlor. He ordered 2 vanilla squibs and some tarts. They came on a pewter tray as Goshen and the Indian and 4 men of the committee trooped silently down the stairs. Mr. Morton lagged behind. When he passed the parlor, he glanced in and hesitated. For a moment, I thought he was about to confront me again, but he quickly turned away and stamped out into the rain-pocked street. My father, Isaac said, has not changed his mind an inch. He still thinks Bee is a witch and will think so until his dying day. Likewise, the apothecary, Harold Stokes. However, they are the only 2 men against 4. Father will therefore hold his tongue and not condemn thee to the village. I will not leave Long Pond, I said, even if they all condemn me. Okay, so that is that, and they're eating, and hopefully they're not going to run around of town or out of Long Pond Cave. So I'm going to stop and then I'll record some more.